let's get going. I think we've got, what, 70 people on the line. It's great.
Quorum.
I think that's a fairly decent sized quorum. Look, first of all, guys, I really want to thank everyone for still making the effort to come and see us in a more virtual context. We really do appreciate, as we always say, the community that we sort of live and work within the Sydney design thinking community. So it's fantastic to have so much engagement. Before we get started, I just want to sort of acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. So I'm currently in the Southern Shire, so I'm acknowledging the Dharawal speaking nation, who are the traditional owners of the Southern Shire. We pay respects to our past elders, past and present, and we extend the respect to the Aboriginal people and people visiting my local area. Now, a bit of homework for you guys. If you're not sure of your local area, maybe look it up and find out which local Indigenous people you'd be acknowledging in your area. So it's yes, but anyway. Thank you very much, everybody, for jumping on board. We're going to open up with an icebreaker. I will share my screen, but I will also pay special note to Ben Crothers, who's coming in. He's gone out and started doing his own thing with Bright Pilots, and so I really want to try and thank him for his support today. But maybe I'll head over to you, Ben. What we'll end up doing is we'll break it out into breakout rooms, and you'll get to do the icebreakers in smaller groups once Ben sort of provides the framework for how we're going to do this. So off you go, Ben.
Now, thank you very much for that, Lucas. Thanks for this great opportunity. And what would this meetup be without a COVID-related icebreaker to get us all in the mood? Now, depending on where you're at, you might be facing the potential second lockdown. Let's hope not. Let's hope not. However, let's have a bit of a game here. What we're going to do, in fact, Lucas, you might be driving here to
Yes.
put people into breakout rooms in a moment. But what I'd like you to do is when you land in your breakout room, you'll have about 6 people per breakout room. You'll have roughly 5 minutes to go around and individually just talk about what are 3 things you take with you if you knew you were going into lockdown. And I mean lockdown. Like, I'm not even talking like me, you still get to go to Aldi every day if you want to, right? Total lockdown. What are the 3 things you take? Okay, have fun with it. Jump into your breakout room. Get to know each other a bit, make sure everyone gets a turn, and yeah, just share. What are 3 things you take with you if you knew you were going into lockdown? Have fun. See you on the other side.
Yeah, I might add one thing to that too. You're not allowed to call out your family because that's sort of a given. You can go with your family, and we want to avoid those conversations because some of you out there probably won't put your family on there, and 5 minutes isn't long enough to have that conversation. So, but
Don't
yeah, have some
mind.
fun.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben.
Thanks, mate. Push the button so we're going out into breakout time.
Yes.
We are.
Hi, Thomas.
And I think, Kate, just throw me in a...
And we're back in the main studio, ladies and gentlemen. Are we all back? Bit of a wave. Are we back? Can we hear each other?
Hey, hey.
Worked like magic.
Fantastic.
Get your hand up if you're not here.
Boom, boom. How's that? Was that fun?
It was good.
I'm interested to find out what is one of the weirdest things that you heard, either you said or someone else said. Does anyone want to jump in and offer, like, what's one of the weirdest things you heard amongst the things?
50-meter heated lap pool.
A heated laptop.
A heated lap pool.
Oh,
50-meter one, no less.
I dig that. I dig that. Someone else?
I'd be up for that.
I've got a jumping castle.
Jumping castle. Well, that's one way to lose the COVID 5 kilos, isn't it?
Exactly what that was for. Yeah, exactly.
Nice. One more. What's a weird one that we heard? Or a funny one?
Well, I don't know whether this constitutes weird, but I said a drone because that would allow me to get out without actually getting out.
Nice.
The possibilities.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and taking footage of empty streets.
And then taking that footage and then filming like your own post-apocalyptic movie.
Oh, I love it.
All right, all right.
I'm in. Let's
Yes,
do it.
and yes,
We should
and
totally
keep
jam
going.
on this, dude. We should totally jam. Hey, let's do another bit of game halfway through the meetup this evening. But for now, Kate, I'll throw it back to you. Thanks, everyone.
This one, Ben.
So, oh, I'm getting feedback. No, it's all good. Okay, good to go. Welcome, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that icebreaker and had a chance to meet a few new people, new faces. So I'm really excited about getting an opportunity to introduce our two speakers tonight because they're both colleagues of mine who I get to work with. So we have tonight two ThoughtWorks product managers, and our first speaker is Meaghan Waters. And Meaghan is, I've known Meaghan for 9 years now. And every time Meaghan opens her mouth, I learn something new. So, so she's going to be speaking tonight about behavioural science. And this really comes to the heart of why people just don't want what's good for them. So I'm going to hand over now to Meaghan.
Cool. Thanks for that, Kate. That's lovely. Look, I'm just to give you a heads up, I'm actually going to try something newish here for me, which is that I'm going to do this talk with pretty much no slides. And this is on the back of, I spent close to 2 hours today doing a presentation and discussion at which all I could see were my own slides in front of me. And I found it really hard and I found it really tiring, and who knows, I could have been talking to nobody by, you know, halfway through. So given that my slides are more around placeholders and they would kind of work in a physical environment because, you know, they'd just be background to me, within this environment, except for one or two that I'm going to put up because I think they do show something, I'm going to do it sans slides. So let's see how that goes, and I'd be interested in the feedback on that.
And would you like questions at the end of your presentation?
Yes. I mean, I'll put them in chat because this way, see, I can still have chat as well, going and the whole bit. But I can't guarantee that I won't be off on a flight of fancy and that chat will pass me by. So let's give this a whirl on this wild roller coaster ride that is the beautiful world of 2020. So thanks, Kate, for the introduction. As I said, my name's Meaghan Waters. I've been working in the field of human-centered design and product management for over 20 years, and the last 10 at ThoughtWorks because I really like seeing design turned into reality. But I came to design via economics, architecture, and a deep-seated interest in anthropology and consumer psychology. In fact, my first stab at a degree was an economics degree. And I quit that once I realized that it was all heavily predicated at that time on the theory of rational man. And yes, the gendering is intentional and has implications. For me, this just didn't make sense. It was like this did not gel with what my experience was in the world. And I went, no, I can't do this. And then, you know, moved on to math stats and then just straight maths and then ended up in architecture and yeah, anyway. So it goes around and round. But luckily for my struggle with economics at that point in time, there were much cleverer and more dedicated people who'd had that same reaction to the way economics was taught at the time, and they developed that whole discipline of what's become known as behavioural economics. And I just got to take advantage of it later in my career when I turned to design and to product management. And specifically for me, a good chunk of my career has actually been in that sort of enterprise type design and product management. You know, all those supposedly boring type systems that actually end up forming a key part of people's working world. In particular, it really started to make an impact on me, these studies coming through from behavioural economics, when I was involved in a number of system replacement projects. And it's like you're going, yeah, that's lovely, Meaghan, and you know, thanks very much for sharing. It's really nice. And yes, Nicole, my God, Nicole, sorry, your surname is like, if I flip the U and the I, it's actually my sister's name. She married a chap called Louis, who's actually Thursday Islander, not Chinese, but she gets up. So, oh my God, that was really weird. When I looked at it and went, why is my sister on a design thinking meetup? And then it was like, oh, no, okay, right, hi. Anyway, right back. So yes, it was lovely to then share with me, and we're all there. Oh, how awesome. Well, but how does this apply after that pathway off to the side? How does this apply to a design thinking meetup? Well, if we take as an initial premise that design is the rendering of intent, which is possibly my favorite description of design, then one of the gaps in a lot of design thinking approaches and discussions is that they fall short of that final steps to making that happen. They concentrate on designing and building the thing, sort of on the premise that if you build it, they will come. And then designers get really frustrated on why no one came or stayed. You know, like they did all the right things. They talked to people, they got all the information in, they tested, they did it, but then it didn't end up working. And often it's because of that final mile. And, you know, it's like, and why should they not come? Because, you know, it's obviously, you know, you've created a better thing, and, you know, I have enough faith in you all to assume that that's what happened. So what happened? The rational thing was for it to have worked. So why didn't it? Are people stupid? No, just irrational, you know. But the upside of that is that they can be, as many of you may have actually heard another phrase, predictably irrational. And this is where behavioural economics came into play. So the American economist Richard Thaler is credited with popularising the term behavioural economics. He took traditional economic theory and he mixed it with psychological theory to attempt to better describe how human behaviour affects markets. And valuation gaps and exchange asymmetry, you know, are two of the most widely studied phenomena, and the things that start to play in why people don't do what's good for them. And those are the things that come into play on that, you know, that acceptance of your new, obviously superior products. So rational economic theory posits that if something is even a bit better than what someone already has, then they would move to the new thing, because it's only rational. But behavioural economic theory, on the other hand, looks to explain the irrationality on why that doesn't happen. So let's take a look at some of the key theories that explain why people are not doing what's good for them. It's not going to be exhaustive because A, I am both not an expert in this field, and B, you all don't have the week or two to get through all of that. So, so to give you an idea of the length and breadth of this overall topic, I will share screen for a moment and go, if you want to take a look into some of the stuff that's impacting more, this is the Cognitive Bias Codex. If you just type it in, takes you through to, and at the moment, oh God, I can't remember who put it together, but it's within Wikipedia itself, where they effectively pulled all the biases that are stated in Wikipedia together into one diagram. It's an awesome little visualization. I love it. And these are all, you know, you can link through onto all of them and it will give you all of those pieces and these biases that are feeding through into behavioral economics. So if you want to take a look at it in theory, look at all that, but not just yet, because I don't want to split your attention. See what you did there, yeah? So So that's why we're going to focus on just a few of them I've found have really impacted my work over the years, and ones that kind of led me down that path of going, why is this happening? And then I was reading something, you know, that someone was writing about something in behavioural economics, and it was like, oh, I wonder if, and then you go down this path of looking at things. So the key ones that I would like to talk about here, given the time and everything that we've got, is I want to focus on satisficing, endowment effect, and loss aversion, with a little detour via psychological inertia and the status quo effect. If we've got time, then it's probably worthwhile also to highlight a couple of biases that are actually affecting you and why you think what you're offering is in fact better than what people have. So basically, it's not them, it is you. So we can look at this if we get time, because I have a tendency to go via diversions as I'm going through. So let's kick it off. Satisficing. It's a great word. It's a portmanteau word. Many of you have probably already heard it. If you haven't, it's an awesome term. I love it. And it explains so much around both designs that you create, but also why people aren't going with this thing that is better. It explains the tendency to select the first option that meets a given need, or select the option that seems to address most needs rather than the optimal solution. And if the option for someone is changing to something new, but the current solution that they've already got to their problem pretty much meets their needs, it's like you're just not going to get cut through. You know, they're not going to change. They're not even going to spend much time thinking about changing. It's like, no, I'm pretty happy. And it's like, oh, there's all this stuff, and I have to, because satisficing is a decision-making strategy, or what's also termed a cognitive heuristic, which is the fancy way of saying a bias, really. But it's kind of a shortcut that people use to move forward. So it just entails searching through the available alternatives until an acceptable threshold is met. This was a theory developed by Herbert A. Simon, and he used it to explain behaviour of decision makers under circumstances in which the optimal solution cannot be determined. And this is because there's stuff that's unknown, or there's so much complexity in it. So look for that decision, that the first decision that comes forward that seems to most meet all the needs. And he maintained that there are many natural problems that are I love this term. I took the thing because I loved all the jargon in it. Are characterized by computational intractability or a lack of information, both of which preclude the use of mathematical optimization procedures. Sounds very fancy, doesn't it? Basically, there's not enough information to really get it down in any sort of time frame to that conclusion. So you're operating in this. So what it kind of is that people are either, to make a decision, because the decision is necessary, they are either simplifying the world to make the optimal decision within that simplified world, or they are just finding the satisfactory solution within the more realistic world. So you can either simplify the world or you can simplify the decision-making process, but one or the other. You are not looking for that rational man approach of logically searching for, the optimal solution. So, and this came about, and this was satisficing, oh God, if I can remember correctly, it's like about 40, 50 years old as a theory and as an approach. And it was that, pointing to that whole thing around rational choice theory, and going, that's just not reasonable and not reflective of human decision processes. And essentially we need to start injecting some psychological realism into it. And I think what we have a tendency to do sometimes as designers is to go, well, logically it's better. It must be, therefore people will choose it, as opposed to injecting that psychological realism of the people around you and the way that they operate into it. And So what you've got to do is make it very clear to people. You've got to simplify their world for them, or simplify that decisions. And this is actually something that does happen very commonly, and it does happen commonly in marketing if it's done well, and information that's presented to people, and choice options that are made to people. You know, look, I've seen it, I've done it. Many of you have, like, you know, I watched a version of this behavior play out in real life when I was testing the public facing website for a new super product. And it's very easy. People just take a scan through and they look for keywords and key things. They go, yes, this is worth my time to spend more time investigating it. So they're not looking for the best solution. They're looking for the solution that will satisfy them at that point in time. So that's one reason why they're not going to do it, is because it's like, well, the world is complex and I'm looking for the solution that is good enough. The other big one is the endowment effect. And this plays a lot into why people don't go for the thing that is best for them. The endowment effect was identified by Richard Thaler as part of his groundbreaking work in decision theory, in decision making. And essentially it states that people are more likely to retain an object that they own than acquire a similar object. And that can be similar either in its functionality or in its value. There's been lots of different experiments run around this, looking at different parameters in different ways. You know, one of the standard ones cited is, you know, the coffee mug and the chocolate bar, where they both have the same monetary value, and pretty much reliably, whether you were first given the chocolate bar or the coffee mug depends, is the option that you are more likely to stick with. It's neither of them are better. You just own one. You were given one. You didn't even make a decision to it, and you are less likely to trade away. Whether you were given a chocolate bar or a coffee mug, you own it. Therefore, I don't value the thing that, you know, what is equal in value as much as the thing that I own. But we do see this. This turns up all the time in real life, and you can watch this happen through. And this was why people started looking at these theories, because they were watching things happen. Like, you know, think about your pets, right? You will pay more to keep the dog that you currently have than to buy another similar dog. Even, you know, it's like, you know, everyone's paid vet bills for their pets. Rationally, that makes no sense, right? But you do it because you own it, you know. Think about $10 a month. Think about, or think about the relationship that you have with various bits of tech, software and hardware, that you use on a daily basis, and those various conversations that you've had at one time or another around why something that you own and use is better than the other thing that someone else owns and uses. Think about all those. There's, like, rationally, there's probably not much in it, but you own it, and therefore it has more, you focus more on its virtues than on the thing that you don't own. And that happens again and again. Now, think about it in terms of your users that you've made this beautiful, better thing for, whatever it is. In the area that I often work in, it's enterprise software. So you're looking at systems. And in that context, you are looking at systems and processes that people could have been using for years. They have status, they have self-worth attached to those systems. And in the most extreme cases, they've spent more time on a daily basis with those systems than they've spent with their own children. They may not have paid for the system with money, but they do have a sense of ownership. And they are impacted by that endowment effect, and they will value it more than anything else you put in front of them. So you need to try and transfer that feeling of ownership to the new product, or position your new offering as substantially different. Within the enterprise world, we try and do this by, you do lots of co-design and collaborative workshops, and big focus on, you know, change management and communication. I suppose in a B2C world, the most common way that you do it is through those trial runs, you know, those month trial runs. What they're trying to get you to do is to transfer ownership across with minimal cost, so that you then use it, you feel like you own it, and then you don't want to give it up. So there are a few theories that have been developed to explain the endowment effect, and they include psychological inertia, where people prefer inaction over action in many circumstances. The status quo effect, where the loss of the status quo looms larger than the gain of the alternative option, to the extent that they'll actually invest resources in maintaining the status quo more than you would in moving away from it. All of these play out in different circumstances and different ways. But the one that I found looms largest in my work with users is loss aversion. And this is, so as Kahneman and Tversky found in their research, and just trying to get all my people lined up. So Kahneman was responsible for thinking fast and thinking slow. Thaler's responsible for nudge. I'm just kind of putting the names of books out. Lots of people know them. I'll give you those. But that they found in their research is that you value your losses much more, and 2 to 4 times more than any potential gains. And in enterprise stuff, and particularly when looking at those legacy replacements, what you generally have is fully functioning systems. So anything less than like that, less than those fully functioning, you know, all the bells and whistles in a range of different ways, half of which you never use. Think about, you know, even just think about like Microsoft Word and the fact you never use anything. But the loss of any of those features going forward is going to be seen as much more important than the gain of anything new. So the new has to dramatically outweigh the loss. And where this plays out and where this tension comes in as well is that, and why loss aversion can be hard to manage, particularly in an enterprise situation, which is where I'm most familiar with it, but I'm sure it plays out in B2C, is that the people making decisions often about the product are not the people who are going to be affected by the loss. So the people who make the decisions are kind of more in an investment mix where they're looking to maximize gains. And so they are more willing to go, yeah, it's better. It'll be fabulous. It'll be super fabulous. The people who are impacted by it are going, have the ownership from that usage, and they are going to be focused on the losses. So hence why you get this challenge, and that's why you kind of need to break out of your bubbles and make sure that not just are you talking to people along the way, but are you managing those effects in a longer term way, from that end to end of actually getting people to adopt stuff. So as I said, so the ways around loss aversion instead is to look to transfer that psychological ownership or to communicate benefits that place your thing kind of in a bit of a new paradigm. So they're not doing direct comparisons, to minimize the losses, either in reality or just in the way that it's presented and communicated and talked about to people, and acknowledge the loss, but move on quickly from it and to go, yeah. And to present options if you can. And you see this all the time as well, particularly in the B2C world, where they go, you know, like there's multiple options and they manipulate the way that they're shown so that you end up kind of being more driven towards one particular one. But it is that fact, if people are more likely to take a risky approach, and anything new is riskier, if retain or acquire are not the only two options. Like you have other paths and other ways through that. So these are some of the strategies you can start to look. So that was a quick wrap up of at least the kind of the 3 ones that always loom largest in my mind and have been there from why people are not doing what's best for them. But I think, have I got 5 minutes to just quickly talk about, because let's look at what may be affecting your belief that what you've designed and built is better, because you're as subject to these biases and these behaviours as any of the people that you're looking to make a change. So let's talk the top 2, which is confirmation bias and plan continuation bias. There we go. And you've probably both been affected by these, even when you have tried to be very aware of them. So confirmation bias is what happens when we're looking for clues to prove that we're right. So you think you've got a fabulous solution. You've even tested it. Like you have gone out, you have done you've ticked all the boxes in, you know, your classic design thinking approach. It's awesome. And it's like, yeah, it's like, it's right. Yeah. good luck with that one. Because, and look, you know, I would suggest most people are quite, within this profession, are quite self-aware, and you are trying to combat against it. But it is actually one of those good things. Why is, and I hate it. I find it so challenging, is to actually give the testing of your products over to someone when you didn't design them. It's really hard. I hate doing it. So, which is all of that thing, because no, I want it to be fabulous. I want it to be the best thing. Why is it not? But it is that thing. We see it everywhere. Look, it's a natural tendency that we have to constantly fight against if we want to be good designers. Because if we have an existing belief about something, we are more inclined to view ambiguous signs, and we're more likely to push them into signs of being in our favour. You know, and it manifests in lots of different ways. Maybe we remember something inaccurately, but in our favour. Maybe we pick out the words we want to hear when someone's telling us and describing their behaviour. Or we might overemphasise kind of correlation as causation. Look, we fight it all the time. One of the ways of getting around to it is, as I said, turn over your design to someone else for testing. Often it's not actually possible. And that's where kind of using those well-defined hypotheses and experiments and then sticking with it. And that's the hardest bit. So you go, you know, I believe that if this happens, then we will get this, and the evidence for this will be X, Y, Z. If you are not seeing X, Y, Z, then don't find a justification around why you shouldn't be. Stick with it. Be disciplined. It's tricksy. Do it. You're all tough. You're all brave. Hey, we've got through the last 4 months. We can get through anything. So the reason, so we should look for evidence to prove you're wrong as well. You may choose later on, if it turns out that you are pretty right in the way that you're doing, you may choose to massage the narrative a little bit, but look for that evidence. If you can't actually see something that shows something in there is wrong, then your bias is way out the window, because everything is wrong. I don't believe anyone is that perfect. So we want to try and avoid confirmation bias, and this then leads, and one of the reasons why we are so tending towards confirmation bias is that we fall victim to one of the biggest cognitive biases in product service delivery, which is planned continuation bias, or sunk cost fallacy. You know, you might have heard under those terms as sunk cost fallacy. And planned continuation bias is basically just the behavioural manifestation of the sunk cost fallacy. You know, sounds a bit fancier. Basically, what happens when we say, I've come too far to let this stop me now. And in a extreme case of it, and just to give you, I love these studies that come out of aircraft, because my run up to a master's was in fact in HCD, and the only place at the time that I was looking to do that they had an HCD course was in aeronautical engineering. So I got to read a lot about airplane crashes and problems in there. So a 2004 study by NASA of 19 major US aircraft crashes over 10 years found that sunk cost fallacy was basically one of the major causing factors in accidents on runway approaches. Basically, the pilot had committed to their plan of landing without taking into account new information on poor weather conditions or some other barrier. So they've gone, I'm here now, I'm in, I'm going, I'm not going to stop for any reason. And they just keep going. And that led to more crashes than almost anything else. So look, this is ways to avoid it is to absorbing some of those lean methods of product development, you know, and using them. Things like lean value trees, where you tie kind of initiatives to bets, to goals, to that overall vision, and making those things as bets and phrasing them in that way, which then streams back to this whole behavioural economics of the way of framing things. So found it intensely useful to frame things as bets, both for yourself, but also for stakeholders. Gives you that way of getting around that bias, and that out to move away from assuming that you've got the right thing. And that's the way through that. So that's kind of my rundown on it. I think I kept it roughly within time, but that's why, from my perspective, people don't do what's best for them. And, you know, I mean, the classic that's raised is nudge. If you haven't already read it, do it. Just as that fascinating direction of the other methods that you can actually get people to nudge into right behaviours. But this was more around, I suppose, that design of where it goes wrong within the design. So thank you all. Are there any questions? I've seen some fabulous comments in there. So
there's lots of chatter, and I can't see a lot of questions. Just Lucas has publicly confessed to the fact that he secretly votes for his own ideas when
Lucas.
stop voting.
Oh.
What particular bias is that?
That's confirmation bias.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the best idea. It's the best idea.
I now want to do, you know how we've got those pictures, those memes of the shaming of pets? You know, my pet, it's like, I want to do one of those for you know, now for designers, where it's like, I vote for all my own ideas. And various other things. Yes.
Yeah, I have to hold myself back from doing it because I know it's not the right thing to do. So.
Aaron had a question.
Yeah.
Oh, you got it, Kate? No? Okay. Aaron asked the question, can co-creation help minimise the challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of those great ways of pulling, transferring ownership, is that in those early days. And particularly, you don't have a lot of ability to do that in B2C world. You do have a lot of opportunity to do that in enterprise world. And I would say if you are not doing it, you are setting yourself up for failure along the way, because what you want to do is you want to make advocates. So make the advocates for your own, and then a whole bunch of your work is done. People feel they own it. They want other people to feel their ownership of it, and it can roll through.
It's interesting with the satisficing bias. I wonder if there is some rationality in that, because otherwise, if you're going to look for the optimal solution, you've got to spend all this time and energy, and it's like, oh, that's so much time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely the way people behave, because, and you know, there are various convoluted ways that traditional economic theory goes to justify satisficing, but essentially once you bring in that whole psychological theory into it, which is the joy of behavioural economics, it's that mashup of it, it becomes a lot more easy to understand and a lot more you know, reasonable. I love it. As I said, I love the work.
Oh, yeah. I've got a man crush on Dan O'Reilly. He does some awesome TED Talks.
Yes. All those. If you want to look at, and I'm just calling out because most of the economists who get referred to in here, oh God, now the names completely fled my mind. I feel bad. But look up a book called Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner, which talks about economics from a female perspective, from that way of, in fact, how female labour has been excluded from economic theory and why that has effectively skewed economic theory for so long. And that in many respects, that bringing in of that behavioural economics has helped to start to move away of economic theory from that skewing so strongly. Can I ask a question on air re cognitive cost, please? Nicole, I'm just going. Yeah, you can. Go for it.
Great. Hello, everybody. This is my first time ever on this meetup anyway, so I'm excited. Thank you so much for your talk, Meaghan. So in relation to satisficing, I wanted to ask that in certain, like, I don't want to generalize in terms of different things. So basically, if I'm choosing to buy, let's say, grocery versus if I'm trying to buy a car. Now, I don't have expertise, right? So the cognitive cost for me to select a car is very high. So I'm much more likely to be satisficing there, right? But if I'm really discerning about my grocery, now I'm probably going to go down the whole aisle just to pick, I don't know, like a particular tea. Do you know what I mean?
No.
So would you say that when you're sort of doing testing on things, that you need to take that into consideration in relation to the particular population you're looking at?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, all of these things, and I would advocate reading more around there if you're interested, but all of these things are affected by the level of investment needed, the knowledge in that background, all of these things come into play. But you do say, I mean, in different audience. So you're looking, and this is why that whole thing around audience segmentation becomes quite important to you as well, to understand what's going in. Because even in the groceries, and it's like, I could see Arun like going, nah, I don't look. Whereas me, it's like Saturday morning shop, you know, my husband goes in, he just goes straight into Woolies, gets the things off the shelf. It's like, for me, I go to the supermarket and it's like, no, I get these type of apples from this particular store, and I get my meat comes from this place and this place, and I'll get that. And it's because, and that's really important, and I know quite a lot about it. With cars, it would be that thing of, okay, where do we go? And I'll just start to narrow it down to a few things that I really understand and feel comfortable with, and that is around the knowledge that's in there. Absolutely.
You know, I find it funny. Like, I think I probably would annoy everybody who satisfies themselves because I overanalyze things. So I want to make sure, like, if it's buying a car, I don't know a lot about cars. I want to analyze. I want to make sure I'm making the most out of my investment. And
you,
crazy.
And I am just going to be wildly generalistic here, completely, and probably quite sexist. But it is that whole fact of you are the reasons why. Economic theory and this whole concept of rational man, and I use the man with a capital, stuck around for so long, because it's like when you mostly have men in a profession and they're mostly looking at it a particular way, and they tend to have, and also economists, you know, so we're talking about there's natural self-selection going in here, and you get these things perpetuating, which why coming in with that broader perspective from that whole psychological theory, which, you know, tends to look at a more broader world than economics, has kind of brought in a whole bunch more into it. And Katie's looking at me going, excuse me, she's doing a little sign here. Oh, okay. I'm missing.
No, I think she's saying you're crazy.
I still can't interpret her. Thank you, Ben. Absolutely. So I'm sorry for that little rant. Sometimes, you know, mostly things don't bother me. It's just like, I get, like, don't even get me started on my theory on why evolution took so long to be recognized as a theory, which has to do with the fact that the people raising the children were the people, were different people to the people actually out studying the animal kingdom. Because anyone who's raised a baby goes, baby monkeys, yeah, totes real. It's like, obviously. So anyway, diverse team's very important. Right, sorry, is there any real questions again, or otherwise I'll just keep ranting, and don't even get me started on why the Middle Ages took so long. Right, should I, is there anything else?
I can't see any more questions, and yes, unless you have any bonus biases up your sleeve.
Yeah, go pick one. I think it is. I think there needs to be a game developed around biases, you know, where it's like, oh, pick your favorite biases.
I haven't actually seen the interactive version of that before.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it?
A lot in my decks.
Yeah. So go check it out. Look, go check out that there's actually a website called behavioural It's spelt the American way. There's my, you know, great bias against, you know, God, what, the extra letter. Anyway, which is great as a general rundown. I was looking through there going, because it was like, oh God, have I got in my head right around what, you know, valuation gap was? And so it's like, okay, I need to go and check this out. So look, if it's something that interests you, definitely go and read it. Look into more. Daniel Ariely, as I said, Richard Thaler, they're all there. You know, Nudge, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, the Gladwell books, Freakonomics. Freakonomic podcast is always fabulous for new stuff coming through. Yeah, so, and it was great. Can I just ask, did the no slides work? Were we fine with that? Cool. Beautiful. And Matt, I'm not trying to put you on the spot because I know you've got slides, but your slides actually say something and are meaningful and illustrate things, whereas mine were just, you know. kind of
Gonna
words.
dare me to get rid of my slides, Meaghan.
No.
Is that a challenge?
No, not in the slightest. Cool. Thank you all very much. I'll go on mute.
Well, look, thank you very much, Meaghan. That was a really great, insightful talk. Really enjoyable. I think it's beautiful that you bring your personality to the talk as well. It was fantastic. So, especially when you saw your sister-in-law on the chat group, it was fantastic. And I think you muted yourself. Anyway, so I'm going to just share my screen. I want to just before I hand back to Ben for the next Energiser, we might. Do we want to continue, or do we want to take a 5-minute break? Maybe people want to go grab a drink. 5 minutes, yeah. So I can see a few hands going up with 5 minutes. Yeah, okay. So we'll have a break for 5 minutes, but and then Ben will come and run another Energiser. But before we do that, I just want to break up. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of what Ben's doing now. He's just gone and started a new organisation called Bright Pilots, and he has an ebook out at the moment, all about remote-friendly icebreakers, which I think we can all use now. So feel free to go and have a look. I've got a copy. It's really good. So
where could we buy that book, Ben?
Get it downloaded. Send me an email. I'll send you a bootleg copy.
I believe if you go to bit.ly 50 icebreakers, you might go there. That's bit.ly/50 icebreakers. Yeah.
There you go.
Great timing. Yeah, look, we all need to get back our meeting mojo. It gets hard, doesn't it? You know, we don't want to be zombies. We don't want to turn our poor, helpless, hapless attendees into zombies either. Good news, we can get some mojo back. We can use icebreakers, energizers, those kind of friendly jolts to keep people alive, interested, engaged, productive. And I've piled 50 time-worn, battle-worn, but true, functional and fun, remote-friendly icebreakers. And it's in all the various ebook formats. And it's actually in a deluxe color PDF format as well. But if you go to bit.ly/50 icebreakers, there's links there. You can get any kind of flavor of ebook you want, Amazon, Kobo, whatever. And they're all actually online as well. If you go to brightpilots.com/icebreakers, just for free, like you can go through and get one at random, which I actually think is really cool. Like imagine you're on your way to a meeting and you think, oh, quick, I need a thing. I need a new way just to get my group energized before we go in. Just go to brightpilots.com/icebreakers and it just throws one up at random. If you don't like that one, hit the green button, you get another one at random. So check that out. I hope you like it.
And all with your famous sketches and illustrations, which
I
kind of half the price.
I kind of went to town. Oh, this is me doing design thinking in isolation, by the way. I actually thought, what problem can I solve that the world needs, that I can make money from, that I enjoy? So I got a kick out of doing it. I hope you get a kick out of using it as well. Thanks, everyone. Should we go to a 5-minute break?
Yeah, I think so.
Cheers for the plug. Thanks, Lucas.
No worries. No, thanks for. You want to fire away, Ben?
Yeah, sure. I hope we're refreshed. I hope you got a halftime drink. I just poured myself a pint of Guinness, so I'm very, very happy. Now, in our last exciting episode, in the icebreaker there, we had to take 3 things into lockdown, imagining if we were in hard isolation again. So let's continue with that theme. Imagine for a moment that you didn't get to choose what you took in. Lucas chose for you, and he said, here you go, have some spam. Now, Lucas, do you want to share your screen, mate, and show the next icebreaker that we do? Here's the next one. This is to get your creativity juices going. Once you get into your breakout room, have a go at this. In your group, come up with as many alternative uses as you can for an empty spam can. Now, by the way, all of these icebreakers that are in the book and that I use are universal. I think we've all sort of had variations of this, but this one I find is really, really useful to get people into a creative mindset. So have fun with it, give it a go. In your breakout group, just go around as fast as you can. All ideas are good ideas. You don't have to be smart about it. You can say whatever you want, but come up with as many alternative uses as you possibly can for an empty spam can. And how long, Lucas, are we going to go for?
I think we'll just do 5 minutes again. It should be.
Okay. Let's just model some behaviour that we'd like to see everyone, shall we, sir? I'll go first. I reckon I could use it as a percussion instrument. What would you use it for?
Coffee. I drink my water. I've got to drink from a drinking vessel. I'll pour a pint of Guinness into it.
Nice one. So you get the idea. The crazier, the better. It'd be really interesting to see where you go with this. But let's spend, how long is it, Lucas?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Keep going around. Have fun with it. See you on the other side. When I said I use this in a workshop, I have an embarrassingly large
props.
These I use them in workshops. They come in very, very handy. I don't know about your group. I tallied ours up. I had Anna and Francesca. There were 3 of us. We came up with 19. I counted 19. 17
here.
17
here.
And there was just 2 of us.
Woo!
Only 2 of us. We got 18 too.
Oh well, you win.
18, 19.
Sorry, what was the question?
Did any group get more? Come up with more ideas than 17, 18, or 19?
We were coming up with so many we forgot to count. Only one track. We couldn't. Counting would distract us from coming up with more ideas.
Of course.
Yeah.
In the zone. Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. I hope that was fun for you. That's yet another little energizer to keep in mind when you want to have something fun to do with your team or something in a workshop where you want to get people into a creative mindset. Cheers,
so, Ben, is there a can of Spam in the mail for the winning team?
Oh, wait. I don't have any stamps.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we'll probably hand over to Kate again so she can introduce Matt, who I believe is joining us from Melbourne.
That's right. Matt is in lockdown for the 2nd time. So, yeah, our thoughts are with you, Matt. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think this is your first Sydney Design Thinking meetup. Matt, I've worked with Matt for I think a year now, and Matt somehow ThoughtWorks snagged Matt, who is an international product management superstar. He's worked in Berlin and Brussels and London and all around the world. He's worked with startups and all the way through to enterprise, and he's worked at every stage of product delivery, from discovery through to managing, maintaining and growing products. And tonight he's going to be talking to us about product discovery. So Matt, would you like to share your screen, and I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you, Kate. And as you say, I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, so that means I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Birrung people of the Kulin Nation. So I'd like to acknowledge their elders, past, present and emerging. Okay, so I am using slides. So I will share those now. Okay, so hopefully you can all see those. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is managing and visualizing discovery. And it's an area that I'm really passionate about, because I think that as product and design people, we sometimes let ourselves down by allowing ourselves to be kind of dragged too much into delivery. And I've got a theory that one of the reasons for that is the way that we communicate to other stakeholders and people who are involved in the process. And I think that we can kind of correct the balance away from execution and delivery to putting more focus on the design and development and discovery phase by having a more structured process. So that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. The way I see it is it's as a meta process. And what I mean by that is that I'm sure everyone in the group is very familiar and focused on specific processes like design thinking, which I see as part of overall discovery. So I think that discovery also encompasses, technical feasibility and commercial viability. So what I want to talk about is the sort of meta process that sits over the top of what we do every day around the specific design process. Talking about process isn't everyone's favorite topic. So, I think we don't always do what's best for us, which is, focus on process. So I just wanted to name check Meaghan's talk there. And the areas that I'll cover are in three parts. The first one, just, what am I talking about when I talk about discovery? Then the second piece will be 4 principles that I think are essential for a successful discovery process. And those principles can be applied to different actual processes. And then the last part will be to just give an example of one of those processes. So I think there's lots of different processes that can work if they conform to those principles, but I just wanted to make it a bit more tangible by kind of diving deeper into a specific process. Okay, so if we get started, what I'm talking about with discovery is everything that happens before we commit to building something. So it's the process of deciding, should we build something and what should that thing be? In this kind of double diamond framework, it's those first 2 diamonds of understanding what's the opportunity and then exploring and defining the solution before we go into delivery. And I probably should call out my own personal cognitive bias here is that, my background is in digital product management. So there's probably some of these things that are kind of biased towards digital and may not equally apply to kind of physical products. But hopefully a lot of the principles are still the same. So when do we kind of know that we've got a problem that's related to a poor overall discovery process? I think that there's a really kind of clear sign of it is if you go and ask people who are working in delivery and actually executing and building the product and just say to them, like, when did we decide to do this and who decided to do this? And I think I'm always amazed at how often that's not clear and how often people are like, well, I think the executive team decided to do it, or there's a strategy team that works on these things. And I think that indicates that something is going wrong in that discovery process. I think we should have a clear decision point that everyone who's working on the product understands. And for better or worse, it doesn't mean that the decision was right, but people at least go, yes, I understood when we decided to go ahead with this and what the process was. I think discovery often gets confused with business cases. And I think that business cases are kind of a false friend. You need them in some organizations, but they're actually quite different from what I would consider to be discovery. And I think the key differences, I've listed a number there, but I think the key ones are around the mindset. And the mindset for a discovery process should be that it's exploratory and that there's a kind of contrariness to it. Like we were talking after Meaghan's session, about confirmation bias and the need to, to challenge our own ideas. I think that's really essential to that discovery process. Whereas a business case is almost the opposite of that. It's actually about persuading people, and it's about committing to your ideas. And so it intrinsically has to be optimistic. I think the other key difference for me, or two that are really important. One is the audience. In the discovery, it should mainly be about the team itself. It should be an internal audience and convincing ourselves that this is the right thing to do. Whereas a business case is usually, the audience is external. It's about getting funding from somewhere else or getting permission from somewhere else. And then the last one, that's a kind of subtle difference, but an important one, I think, is that discovery should primarily be about our chances of success. So what we're trying to understand is, are we confident enough that this is going to succeed, that we want to go ahead with it? Whereas business cases focus more on the benefits of success. And I think this is a kind of a flaw with business cases, is that they don't put enough weight behind the question of, is it going to work? They mainly work with an assumption that it will work, and then just how big is the return going to be? Okay, so the way that I think about the discovery process is about this curve, actually not one we're trying to flatten, but one we're actually trying to make as steep as possible. So the way to read the chart is that as we progress along the x-axis, the cost of walking away from whatever idea we're exploring increases steadily. And our objective is to increase our confidence that the idea is correct as quickly as possible. So we want that curve to be as steep as possible. And the objective is to get it over that dotted line, which is the organization's tolerance of risk. So I think it's not about getting it to 100%. It's not about getting it to the top of the y-axis. It's about getting it over the line and just over the line for our organization. And that line will vary depending on the nature of the organization and the culture of the organization. Startups will have that line almost at the bottom, whereas big enterprises might have it very close to the top. So our objective in discovery is to make that as steep as possible and to minimize the risk and to gain confidence as cheaply as possible and as quickly as possible. Then we take the decision to commit, and you move into a delivery process, which means that your kind of learning curve is a lot flatter, and you're burning through more costs more quickly. It's important to acknowledge that the whole purpose of discovery is to kill off ideas. If you never kill off any ideas, there's no point in doing discovery. The objective is to take that decision earlier, so the first skull and crossbones, rather than towards the end of delivery, the second skull and crossbones, because there's waste in the cost that you've accrued between the potential point you could have decided, where you could have had enough information, to the point you perhaps actually did, which might have been a lot further down the discovery or the delivery process. It's, I think we probably all talk about, dual track agile and continuous discovery. And I think that that's something we should absolutely aspire to. But I think in my experience, there's a kind of natural sort of front loading of discovery and kind of lumpiness to it, because you have to take a kind of upfront decision about whether you're going to move the piece of work into a delivery process that will get it in a state that's ready for it to be in the hands of customers. And you can make that as lean as possible, but I think that there is still that, that commitment and risk in putting it in the hands of customers, and that means that you need to kind of front load that discovery process. So what I think it often looks like is this, with the bubbles indicating the, the effort and probably the team size for discovery and delivery. And I think the continuous aspect of it is this kind of wave effect where you invest in discovery and you've got a sort of smaller team working on that. You commit to doing it, and then you bring on the higher costs around delivery. Discovery still continues as you're developing and responding to feedback from the delivery process or even a live product. And then you get to the point where you've really committed and that tapers away, but then you're bringing up the next product or the next feature or the next initiative. So, I see that continuous process as being this kind of wave-like effect. So to me, that's what discovery is. The reason I think we need a strong process around it and a strong sort of meta process around it is because the stakes are really high and we have bad instincts. And I think Meaghan covered a lot of those instincts in her talk about why being too opinion-based and using too much judgment doesn't necessarily get you the right outcome. And so it makes sense for us to kind of create this scaffolding around that decision, which is the process. And I think that there's 4 principles that encapsulate a good process. And those are, it should be systematic, it should be focused, it should involve a team approach, and the process should be visible. So we'll talk about each one of these in a little more detail. So the first one is that it should be systematic. And so this is the, combating the hippo effect, the highest paid person's opinion. We want to make data-informed decisions wherever possible. I don't think it's rarely possible to make a decision that's 100% data-driven, but we want to maximize the amount of kind of data-informed decisions and minimize the amount of opinion-based decisions. So that's point one. The second one is just avoiding that groupthink. And I think a systematic and structured approach helps us avoid that. And it means that there's less ability for a strong personality to carry a room, or for a team to kind of find consensus because it's comfortable, which I think can happen if there's not good structures in place to avoid that. And then the last point is really acknowledging that we do have to make judgment calls, that the data won't fully tell us the answer, but we should use a process that's structured enough that we do that in a really mindful way, so that we know that we're making a judgment call, and that everyone who's part of that decision understands it, and that we go into it consciously rather than kind of unknowingly. So that's number one, being systematic. Number two is about focusing on the right questions. So the process that we use should make sure that we have that focus. And that's because it's an expensive process. So it's expensive just the investment of people's time. And it's also expensive from a kind of emotional and organizational energy point of view. Everyone feels very nervous about sort of taking these decisions. So there's kind of cost in doing it. So I would advocate using a kind of focus that is broad, so that you have a 360 perspective on the decision you're taking. And I think something like the IDEO framework of valuable, feasible, viable, or Marty Kagan's framework, which I think is similar but adds kind of usable to that, are good frameworks for making sure we've got that really broad view of the product or service that we're creating. And this is why I was talking before about this being a kind of meta process, because I think that design thinking is about focusing on the value dimension of the product or the usability dimension of the product. And there's similar kind of micro processes that we have to run around technical feasibility or commercial viability. We should also be focused in terms of prioritizing, so that we tackle the highest risks first. Because if we're on that, on that curve, trying to get above the line, and there's a good chance that we're going to need to abandon the idea. Obviously, the earlier we abandon it, the better, the less investment we've made. So that means we should tackle the things that are most likely to kill the idea first. And then the last one is just trying to limit the scope of the discovery, and particularly, I think, splitting between the opportunity and the solution is an easy way of trying to control that. Because I think otherwise, if you're sort of bouncing between, is there even a market for this? What's the potential? And then diving into the specifics of the solution, there's just inefficiency in jumping between those two kind of altitudes of scope. So that's where I think process is important also focus is important in the process that we use. So number 3 is making it a team responsibility. I think any process that we use to manage discovery should be owned by a team. And I think that this is an area that I think we've come a long way from, like, if I think about when I sort of started doing product, there was much more the kind of CEO of the product, the kind of lone heroic product manager who would sort of lock themselves away and formulate this vision, which they define in a functional spec. And I think we've moved a long way away from that. But I think we should use processes that further make it a team responsibility. I think that's important because, first of all, it respects the complexity of the problem. And if we are looking at it from that sort of 360-degree perspective, we need a whole bunch of different skills who are specialists in different aspects of it. So I think that's often product managers, experienced designers, tech leads, I think often own the core of it, but there's lots of other specialists that we're likely to bring in, whether they're like researchers or pricing people or marketing people or operations or customer care. I think pulling all that expertise in is important. I think it's also important to have a team perspective, because it makes it easier to kill off concepts. If people feel like they individually developed the idea and that they're kind of tied to it, and their prestige and position in the organization is going to be affected, it's just a lot harder to let go of that. Whereas if we can create a process where it feels like the team owns it, it's much easier to let go of things without feeling like it reflects on you. And then the last one is that I think if teams own the process, and ideally the same team that's doing the discovery work does the delivery work, you avoid big handoffs and the potential for finger pointing. If things aren't working out, where a delivery team feels like they're building the wrong thing and a discovery team feels like the execution was bad. I think it's always better if there's ownership all the way through, even if it means that different roles within that single team have different focus. I think it's kind of normal that like a product manager or an experienced designer or a tech lead are probably more biased towards the discovery tasks that the team might have. Whereas perhaps an engineer or a BA or a QA would likely be more focused on the delivery tasks that the team has, but there should be the ability for people to move across the two sets of work. Okay, and then the last one, the last principle that I think is important for a good discovery process is making the work visible. And I think that this is something that I think everyone who's doing kind of modern software development is using this sort of principle as part of lean and agile, which are really kind of second nature in delivery. But I think often we don't apply the same thinking to discovery. And I think we should. And the reason for that is that by making it visible, it creates a common understanding of where we are in the process. So, when I say making it visible, I'm thinking about having a discovery wall, which means that people can visualize the process and they start to understand where they are within it. I think it also helps us visualize where the gaps are, and often can reveal gaps in that 360-degree view where it becomes apparent that we're focusing too much on technical feasibility, or we're focusing too much just on the user and we're not thinking about the commercial reality of executing it. Those things get exposed as we make it more visual. And then the last one I think is almost as symbolic, which is to position discovery as equally important to delivery. Often if I look at teams that are building software products, there's a big delivery wall that's the focus of everything that team does, whereas the discovery work that they might be doing is kind of hidden in email or Slack conversations or documents, and it's not visual in the same way. And I think that naturally means that people gravitate more to delivery and put more effort into that, when actually in most cases it's discovery that needs more investment in a lot of teams. So I think it just kind of symbolically makes them more equal. So what does that really look like? I want to just quickly walk through a process that I've used, which I think responds to these 4 principles. There's lots of different sort of techniques you can use, but this is one example. So the way that we've done this is to first of all capture a set of kind of initiative level backlog. And then once we take the decision to start discovery on one of those ideas, and that's really all they are at that point, is to have a kickoff as a workshop. And the focus of that is to break that initiative down into a set of risks and assumptions. So this is really based on the ideas that Marty Kagan talks about, that suggest that the focus of product work and product discovery is to reduce the risks that kill most products. So this kind of tackles that head on and says, what are all those risks across those 4 dimensions of value, usability, feasibility, and viability, and then prioritizes them using that matrix of impact and likelihood. Once we've got those risks, we then want to convert them into tasks that can then be part of our discovery wall. And the way that I've done that is ideally to sort of do it directly. And so if you're using physical cards, which probably no one is these days, but if we get to go back to that one day, even putting it on the back of the card, I think is a good way of keeping the connection between, what's the risk or assumption that we were trying to address by doing this piece of work. And the piece of work is the task. So that might be, the risk might be that customers just aren't going to value this idea that we've had. The task that we're going to do is to do some customer research. So we form that backlog of different tasks that would be across all the different roles in the team. So I think it's important to see tasks there, which are tasks associated with the product value that might be executed by designers, sitting next to technical feasibility tasks that might be a technical spike that might be executed by an engineer or a tech lead, because of that kind of team ownership of the discovery process. It's really important that everyone can see what everyone else is doing and understand that we're only going to be successful if all of these different risks can be addressed. So we just form a sort of simple backlog there. A couple of kind of small call outs is just that the dark solid blue cards are like typical tasks that every discovery process might have. So it might not be that all of them are associated with a risk. There might be things like defining the way we're going to measure success and estimating the work might just be standard things we do. And then the other point to make is that some of those risks we don't need to mitigate, because we're not shooting for 100%. We actually just need to get over that dotted line of our organization's tolerance. It means that some risks we're just going to live with and say it's not worth our effort to try and address that one. So there's then kind of two regular activities that I think that the discovery team can get into a kind of rhythm with. So typically you'd have like a stand-up that often might not be daily, because I think discovery is moves a little bit slower than delivery. So it might be like 2 or 3 times a week, but you're managing that Kanban wall the same way that you would in a delivery process. So trying to minimize work in process, having clear owners on the different tasks. In terms of like definition of done, like you would have in a delivery wall, I think for us in discovery, it's the key stage is that review stage. And that's where the person or the pair who was tasked with doing that work to address the risk then needs to play back to the rest of the team on what they learned, and the team needs to form an opinion as to whether that risk is being addressed. The objective isn't to like execute the tasks. The objective is to address the risks to the success of the product. So everyone needs to form an opinion on whether we achieve that. And sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll do some research or you do some investigation and it just didn't give you the answer, and we should be transparent about that. So that process then informs the kind of second regular activity that I think you can do as part of this process, which is about tracking the confidence that the team has. So the way I would frame it is, if we had to build it tomorrow, what's your confidence that the solution would be? And then the 4 dimensions, and we measure each of those 4 dimensions. And then it's just a simple, fist to 10 assessment out of 10, your level of confidence. And then once we've got those estimates, and the sort of inspiration from that comes from like planning poker, like you would do in delivery estimation, to just get a kind of group view of it. And, I would encourage everyone in the discovery group to state their confidence on all of those things. So it shouldn't just be that the tech lead and the engineer do the technical feasibility. It should be that everyone has a view on all of them. And then what we want to do with those is 2 things. One is to just identify the gaps. So identify where are we weak? Where are people feeling like, I'm not seeing it. I don't believe that we can execute this technically, or I don't believe that customers are going to find this valuable. And then that just prompts a conversation about, okay, what do we need to do to to get you more confident. And that feeds back into the backlog of what other tasks can we do to close those confidence gaps. And then the second piece is for us to just track progress. So I think one of the other challenges with discovery is that we don't have a, you know, burn up or burn down chart like you would in delivery. So often discovery processes can feel a bit endless, and you can just get that sense of like, how do we know when we're done? Should we be stopping? What's the right amount of time? This is just a tool for us to see, you know, are we making progress? So is our confidence increasing? And if it's not, as our investment goes, then again, that starts that conversation about should we keep going with this? I think this is an aspect that is kind of hard to get right, because it's not easy to have a good benchmark against what constitutes a level of confidence. And different people will be sort of, you know, more optimistic or less optimistic. But I think the trend kind of holds up. So, you know, the people's I guess positioning of, you know, where they sort of benchmark themselves, you know, are they optimists or pessimists, generally stays consistent. So you still can see that trend. So hopefully that's given a sort of sense of what a detailed process might look like. But as I said, I think there's a number of other good ones out there. Just to summarize, the reason I'm passionate about discovery is that I think that we need to have a structured process to it in order to have the same kind of value placed on discovery that a lot of organizations already place on delivery. And so I talked about, you know, three things. You know, one is just why it's important, what those 4 principles are for good discovery: systematic, visible, team-based, and I can't recall the other one. And the last one was just an example of a specific technique that I've used that I think fits with those 4 principles and that you can use. So yeah, happy to take some questions if you have some. And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Matt. I'm not sure if everyone's discovered reactions in your palette down the bottom, but there were a couple questions and interesting themes. So you talk a lot about identifying risk, managing risk, and deciding which risks you're going to mitigate. And Ian asks a question: what if you get through your delivery and you still discover that there's a risk that you haven't addressed? I'll give you an example. A global pandemic. So no one would put that up on their board as a risk worth mitigating. It's on nobody's radar until it happens. And there's probably other examples. There's other good reasons why products fail once you release them, despite all the efforts of the team to track their risks, manage, mitigate. What do you do?
So I think there's probably 2 types of risks that get missed. And I think that the first one is the kind of global pandemic one. And I think that that's just, you know, that's the kind of, that's probably above every organization's risk tolerance, you know. So I think we just have to cop that on the chin. And I genuinely don't think there's anything you can do about that. So I think that, you know, that fits in, you know, what's above that dotted line. So, you know, what you're acknowledging is that we're not trying to reduce our risk or get our confidence up to 100%. So by doing that, we're acknowledging that some things will land that are above that 80% line if it's for us, and could still scupper the product, and I think there is nothing you can do about that. In fact, I think it would be wrong to try and avoid that, because the investment you'd have to make into discovery in order to address a risk like that would cost more than building the product. And the purpose of doing the discovery is to invest the right amount of thinking up front. So I think that would be the first type for me, would be that you've just got to take it on the chin. The second type of risks that I think you miss are the small ones that you can iterate out of. So, the purpose of discovery, I think, is to get enough information to give you the confidence that you want to go ahead and commit to doing the work that you're going to do and building the product that you're going to do. It doesn't mean that you have to, it doesn't mean that you have to take a kind of waterfall approach with what you decide to build at the end of discovery is what you're going to end up building. What it needs to be is that you're directionally right, and that you believe that you can then make smaller adjustments as you learn more out of the delivery process or out of initial feedback from customers, and that you can then address those smaller things that can come up. So I think that's the second category for me, and I think that that's fine, because you know that you've got enough confidence that you're heading in the right direction. So those little things you can kind of adjust and accommodate. And that's quite different, I think, from the massive, unpredicted, change everything risk. And I don't think there's much you can do about that.
Sure. There was another thread on the chat, not related to risk, more related to what about when you find yourself in a situation where, it's technically feasible, it's from a business context, it's viable, and your customers love it throughout discovery, you've validated, but looking at it from a lens of, is it ethical? And so what would be your response to that? How do you apply an ethical lens throughout discovery?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'd have to admit that I don't have that built in. I think that it's kind of, it's implied to an extent in commercial viability. So in commercial viability for me includes like regulatory issues and legal issues. But it's a good point. It doesn't explicitly include ethical issues. I think that, if I look back at what I've done, I don't think I've built any unethical products. And if I think about like why that is, and I think that's perhaps where, culture kind of compensates for process. And I think in, a lot of teams that, that I've worked in, that's where those things get caught, is that, people, if you've got a kind of safe environment within the team, people feel comfortable to raise an ethical issue and you can discuss it and adjust to it.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's a really good point, is that's probably, it would be better not to rely on that kind of cultural safety net. It would be better to build it into the process.
I think it's really topical at the moment because Facebook is in the news. There's so much finger pointing within the organisation around, should we be allowing political advertising on Facebook? Is it the right thing to do? And certain features go unnoticed and undetected until an event happens, and that's when we realise the unintended consequences of our work.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and and I think that process would accommodate it. It's just those sort of 4 dimensions are ways of kind of prompting our thinking. So I think it fits within the process. It's just, if do we add it in as a kind of 5th dimension to kind of prompt that thinking and make sure that we do actively think about it, which I think is a really good idea.
I think what I find interesting is when we think about design thinking and you think about desirability, feasibility, viability, I actually think instead of it being 3 lenses or 3 circles, you add a 4th one, which is sustainability.
Yeah.
And you think about that in that context.
Yeah. I think I agree. And you mean both from a sort of ethical point of view?
Yeah, I think
across privacy, environment.
Yeah. And I think sustainability is not just an environmental thing. It's also like it's a social thing. It's what's ethical as well.
And the 3 perspectives of people, planet, and profit / our economy as a proxy for that as well.
Mm.
So triple bottom line or quadruple bottom line, adding in governance.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and I think it's we can accommodate that. It's up to the sort of team to decide what they are, but I would absolutely.
I think the conversation here is quite good because I like the way you talk about it as a meta process because you're thinking about how you're designing your process or how you're running your process. And I think your talk really resonates well with me in the sense that I've done a lot of mixture of a bit of design thinking, a bit of delivery, and I find when I'm on projects, people don't really talk to the UX team or the customer experience team. It's like, and we're trying to solve for pain points. The first thing I'll do on a project is let's go and get the CX team to come in and have a chat to the guys on the project. And by the way, here's your journey map. Here's all your pain points. Here's all these things you can think about. And
I think in some ways we've sort of done ourselves a bit of a disservice in that we don't kind of combine and present all of the work and thinking that we've done. So sometimes we're sort of less than the sum of our parts, in that you're sort of aware that that there's work being done by a design team around the value or the usability. There's kind of technical spikes happening, but often we don't sort of roll that up and really kind of present it so that everyone sees the full picture. So I think it's I actually don't think adding this process is that much more work than's already been done. It's almost about just bundling it up and really kind of exposing it.
I think we had a question. Pardon me. I think we had a question from Jesse. Did you want to ask your question, Jesse? Sorry.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, just choking on a bit.
Okay. Matt, thank you so much. I found it just really riveting. My question for you is, I'm in a CEO role where I'm supporting a team to really go through that process. It's very new for us as a 10-year-old charity. What tips do you have for me as a leader? Because I can tell you I was the hippo, like up until a couple of weeks ago. And I took a holiday and I came back and the team had worked something out that I was getting in the way of for way too long.
Yeah.
So I'm now leading from behind. I'd love any tips that you've got for me to.
Yeah, I think that the role, I think, of the leader is to set the kind of focus for the team and to then make sure that they've got all of the resources that they need to execute, and then give them the sort of space to do that execution. And so what I find works in terms of setting direction is to give them 2 things. One is an inspiring mission. So that's something that's kind of, that's kind of just subjective and words and something that people can understand and, be motivated by. And then the second piece is to give them an objective target that can be measured. And I think that they've both got kind of challenges, but establishing that number, I think, is quite difficult and takes quite a lot of time and investment, because what you're trying to do is kind of boil down that mission into, ideally one kind of North Star metric that maybe then has different metrics input into it, but effectively it's like a model of the value that you're trying to create, which is often hard because, you know, businesses or organizations are complicated, and you often end up with, well, we want this number to go up, but we don't want that one to go down. And then that gets all very confusing to the team. So I think that if you can sort of take the time to try and define that, then you can say to the team, you know, here's your mission, here's the inspiring thing we want you to do. Here's the one number that I want to, you know, see every week, and that you can then go and test against and measure against. And so I think that that's when I think it works really well, and giving the team the people that they need, and also the trust to go ahead and take the specific decisions.
It's awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. It's really helpful.
And Jess, in your context, especially having the whole team aligned around the theory of change and the impact measurements, then that becomes that North Star, not just in a mission and vision, but also down into operations.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
I mean, I think the other thing that is often hard is then giving the team like a defined area that they can operate, because often then what happens is they've got that mission, and then they've got the number that they're trying to move, but then they realize that, well, we can't move it because we're waiting for this team to do something else. So I think that's probably the other thing is trying to structure teams so that they've got their own kind of patch in which they can maneuver and be as independent as possible from other teams who are doing different things.
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, the process sounds really great. Like, I mean, personally, I think in my team, I think it would help if we gave a bit more emphasis on discovery, and like, because currently it feels like we jump into delivery. What advice would you give in terms of launching a process like this? Like, I mean, it shouldn't feel like a process overload at the end of the day. So what's your advice in terms of
yeah, that's a good question. I think it's probably often partly about just surfacing the work and the thinking that's already going on and bringing people together. So I think maybe the first thing you do is to say, well, let's, you know, everyone who's involved in, you know, doing research or thinking that informs that decision, let's just start bringing them together and making the existing work that they're doing visible. So that way you don't have to sort of start, you don't have to sort of introduce this kind of risk-based focus and try and brainstorm new risks. Maybe you just start by saying, here's the different people who might be involved in that, and whether that's like bringing, you know, legal people, finance people, with, you know, decision makers or executives, you know, bringing them into a sort of kind of a stand-up process around that, where they can just see the work that each other is doing. Maybe that's the right way to start. And then once you've got that visibility, you start to sort of see where the gaps are, and then maybe people are motivated to go, okay, well, let's be a bit more intentional about identifying where are the gaps that we're not currently doing. I mean, I think a lot of these things, the thing that is always, I find slightly frustrating, is that a lot of these problems have been solved in delivery. And for some reason, I think us sort of on the discovery side are quite slow to implement just some of the things that, that delivery has been doing for years, just around, you know, stand-ups and showcases and you know, Kanbans. I think just starting with some of those things will get a kind of quick benefits, and people are often quite familiar with it. So you don't have to do too much kind of selling of it in.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Good. All right. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much, Matt. Are there any last questions for Matt? Are we Okay, cool. Well, look, everyone, thank you so much for attending our event. We are looking forward to the time when we can do this in person again. I think we do need to thank our sponsors, ThoughtWorks, who normally provide the space. Currently, today have provided the talent, which was actually really, really nice. We haven't used the ThoughtWorks.
And the digital space. They're hosting on their Zoom. So.
Yes.
And we've got ThoughtWorks bubbles in the room, so that's all good.
But yeah, no, it was, look, I'm really thankful that we do have such great sponsors, and really thankful for the community as well that we have. I think I just wanted to share one last thing on the screen before we go. I think there's a bit of a plug for Bright Pilots again, and his great work and Ben's great work with spam. I think this image got a bit of a mention in Jesse and Mark and sorry, lost my Jesse and Margot's chat we had earlier on today, but it was a great meetup, great engaging conversation as always. I love the fact that we have a lot of conversation after these chats as well, which is really, really what this is about. It's about bringing us together to start asking thought-provoking questions and really get engaging. I think I do miss the face-to-face. We get to catch up and have much more meaningful conversations in our little pockets in the room. But this is, but I think as close as we get to do that now, and I think the Icebreakers Energizer probably helped a little bit with that as well, for us to have a little bit of that meetup feel, which we were trying tonight. So keen to hear any feedback, if you have any feedback on whether that worked or didn't work. I think I also need to thank what we call our Grand Poobah, our head honcho, Ben Pekatich. Zoe, who couldn't make it today, unfortunately. There we go, I've got claps. He's got James as well, and Kate for all of their work putting this together. So, but the biggest thank you goes to you guys, the community. We're still about 70 or 80 strong on the meetup tonight, so it's really, really, really good turnout. So we really appreciate that. And yeah, so thank you very much. I can see Ben clapping.
Yay!
And we're all going to go to the Occidental afterwards if you want to join us for a beer.
Please.
Masks.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to the time when I can catch that last train home and wake up Friday morning with it.
Missed the last train home.
I'll miss the last train home sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you next month. Just as a big plug for next month, we are probably we're focusing on the theme of play. So we've got a ways of working coach who focuses on agile and design thinking, also explores a lot of play in the way he implements it in the workplace. We're also looking at spatial design and designing for children and bringing those two concepts together around childhood into adulthood, and how we sort of deal with play in those two different dimensions. So look forward to sharing more with you. Sorry.
There's a child in all of us. There's
a child we often forget. So we want to try and bring out that inner child. We'll try and make it as interactive and fun as possible as well. But yeah, thank you guys.
Awesome. Thanks everyone.
Thanks guys.
Catch ya.